Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are. This is Randy Pilata from the InterSystems Corporation, and I'm joined today by my colleague Jin Kim, and we're here to present to you on the topic of turning your data into business value with our flagship product, InterSystems IRIS for Health. I'd like to thank you all for attending today, and we are going to go ahead and dive in. Just a couple notes up front. Please do feel free to use the Q&A or chat parts of the WebEx to submit any questions along the way, and we will come back at the end and try to shoot through and answer as many as we can. Also, we will be recording this session and happy to share the slides with anybody after the webinar if there's any reason to do so. So, with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started. What we're talking about doing here, what InterSystems, the journey we're on with our clients, is to turn data, to create business value out of data. And so obviously, InterSystems well known in the healthcare space where EMRs now, the EMR boom is over a decade old. The large health systems, the small health systems, and everybody in between has been collecting data for quite some time now and storing it. And there's obviously tremendous value and insight to be found inside of that data. In addition to the EMRs that have been capturing data, we of course have had our medical devices for many years generating massive amounts of data, your computer on wheels, your bedside devices, traditional medical devices, and now they're of course being joined by IoT, which has arrived in healthcare, and we'll be touching on that in a second. So there are, of course, many other sources of data coming from the health plans and from the regional HIEs and et cetera, et cetera. What we are doing now with our clients is putting this data to work. And we're going to touch on two ways that we're helping our clients achieve value from this data. The first way is leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities working with this data. Essentially what we're going to talk about today is machine learning patterns based on clinical and device data, deriving predictive risk models from that data, and then operationalizing those predictive risk models to lead to real-time notifications that can be used to predict a number of different things that we might be interested in looking into, such as predicting the likelihood of a readmission for a patient or the likelihood for a chronic condition such as type 2 diabetes or congestive heart failure, predicting the future cost for a patient, predicting hospital-acquired infections, et cetera, et cetera. We're seeing a tremendous interest and projects starting, ribbons being cut, to operationalize artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies inside of healthcare. So we're going to touch on the tremendous value that InterSystems brings to those sorts of projects. The second place where we're going to touch on getting value out of your data is related to API management. And of course, in this webinar, we're going to tie both of these themes together because there is a lot to be said for relating one to the other. But essentially at the highest level, what our clients are doing with our new API management functionality that we're going to walk you through in just a minute is a number of initiatives. One thing, as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, the Internet of Things has arrived in healthcare, and what we're finding is a lot of connectivity to get data from the IoT devices or even push data out to them in some cases. It happens over RESTful interfaces, and of course FHIR just continues to grow and grow in popularity and emerge as a very, very standard way to exchange information between a system and an IoT device. So our API management can sit on top of those RESTful services and allow you to optimize the ways in which you're leveraging IoT devices. Another avenue of thought here is around data monetization. We'll touch on that later in the presentation. What we're seeing is that, again, now that our health system clients have collected all of this data, providing access to it, sometimes via real-time APIs, can allow our clients to produce revenue streams based off of this data in many, many different ways. And what we're actually seeing now is the health systems out in the United States, some of them are even starting to hire sales teams to drive activity where either with anonymized or de-identified data, or even where data governance reasons allow sharing the actual copies of their data, allows them to produce revenue streams and essentially create revenue streams by simply providing access to data they collect every day, all day. There are also other sort of marketing and outreach programs that can benefit from API management, such as connecting up with the local pharmacy and having them show next available appointment or emergency department wait times on their website as a way to drive traffic to the health system itself. So in any event, the combination of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and API management is the focus of today's presentation on creating value out of the data that you're collecting every day, all day. The platform we're going to be leveraging to tie all this together is the InterSystems IRIS for Health platform, which is the relatively new application platform geared towards meeting the massive data demands in healthcare. And what you'll see in the live demonstration and subsequent sort of breakdown of the demo is InterSystems IRIS for Health provides health service bus capabilities with API management. Many of you know us as the worldwide industry leader in healthcare interoperability, and so of course InterSystems IRIS for Health has deep support for things like FHIR, HL7 version 2, IHE working with CCD and CDA documents, DICOM for imaging, etc., etc. We also have massively scalable capabilities for more industry agnostic protocols like SOAP and REST, and working with XML and JSON structures. Again, particularly relevant when we talk about device or IoT connectivity. And of course, as FHIR continues to emerge in healthcare, InterSystems remains at the head of the pack in terms of our support for enabling FHIR. We also have in IRIS for Health adapters and optimizations geared to working with artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies, as we'll see in the demo in a second. Seamless data management, open analytics, a workflow engine, and notification delivery. These are some of the additional features that you'll see, but I think many times what's most interesting is that we're going to be showing you solutions and a demonstration that could scale to serve the needs of a massive healthcare institution. But what is generally very interesting about InterSystems in general and InterSystems IRIS specifically is that InterSystems has always had a focus on leading the industry in scalability, and InterSystems IRIS for Health provides tremendous horizontal scalability with a cloud-first approach in many cases, but certainly cloud-friendly in all cases. And in the case where the cloud isn't an option, our ability to leverage commodity hardware and make use of those resources is something that has always been a fundamental principle of InterSystems, and that will also be reflected both in this presentation today and in your experiments with InterSystems IRIS for Health, which is, of course, the enterprise-grade innovation platform for healthcare today. So, to move along, we're going to go ahead and do a live demonstration here. And the inspiration for this live demo is simply InterSystems being plugged in with our clients and watching what they're doing. And what we've noticed out on the news feeds and the interwebs is, as I mentioned before, IoT has arrived in healthcare. So Cedars-Sinai, this is one such example. There's quite a few of them out there. But he came across a newswire fairly recently that Cedars-Sinai is putting Amazon Alexa in each of their patient rooms as part of a pilot program. And of course, if you read the article, the first thing they're looking to do is just simply offload some responsibilities of the RNs and the caregivers, and having to do things like change the channel in the patient room, and that's great. But of course, it then immediately begs the question of what other things can we do when we start connecting in these IoT devices with the rest of our data ecosystem in healthcare. And so we're going to go ahead and dive into a live demonstration now. And what we're going to see is InterSystems IRIS for Health as a platform enabling a enterprise-grade solution where devices, and whether IoT or traditional medical devices and bedside devices, become a triggering event. They are both a data source and a triggering event that allows for real-time risk model execution to determine if a patient is at risk based on the new piece of information that's come from the patient wearable or the IoT device or the bedside device, in combination with whatever additional data we've collected about the patient, and in general, running real-time risk models to identify areas where we could optimize the outcome for that patient. So with that, and we'll come back to this slide later, we're going to go ahead and pop into a live demonstration where we're going to use Amazon Alexa to trigger real-time execution of a predictive risk model, and we're going to then see that model get delivered to a caregiver with a suggested intervention. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Jin Kim, who's going to run us through a live demonstration.
Thank you, Randy. And with that, let's just imagine for a minute that I'm a patient in a hospital named Marla Gonzalez, and there's an Alexa device sitting next to me as a bedside device. Randy and I actually have an Alexa device looking at us right now, and with that, let me show you what this looks like. Alexa, run pain checklist.
Welcome. I am the InterSystems voice assistant. I will go through a simple checklist, and I will send your responses to your doctor. First, what is your first and last name?
My name is Marla Gonzalez.
Thank you, Marla. Now, tell me the month, day, and the year of your date of birth.
January 1st, 1980.
Next, on a 0 to 10 pain scale, tell me the intensity of your pain by saying 0 if you have no pain, or 10 if you need immediate assistance.
My pain level is 8.
Ouch. I will record your pain level as 8 and send for help right away. InterSystems will also examine your unified care record and let your doctors know of any related diagnosis or medication that might be causing your pain. Hope you feel better soon. Goodbye.
Thank you, Alexa. And with that, you just saw an email come through in the Gmail. Now, this can be a physician or any caretaker who needs to know of patients' interactions with Alexa, using the pain checklist here. And we're sending very basic information from IRIS with the predicted diagnosis for this patient, Marla Gonzalez. And right now, it's telling us that this pain might be related to a recent diagnosis of chest pain. Now, this was triggered by patient interacting with Alexa, and the patient interacted with the pain checklist, but now this could have been any triggering events, such as a medical device you have in your hospital today. And we have a RESTful service with Alexa sitting on AWS, and it's sending us a JSON payload to IRIS for Health here. And upon receipt of the JSON payload, we created an HL7 message with the information, and this could be sent to your downstream systems like Epic or feed into your clinical systems. In this context here, the triggering event with Alexa led to an evaluation of the current risk associated with the patient. We have a real-time event that just happened, and now we want to get rest of the clinical data to conduct a holistic evaluation using real-time data. Data can come from your HealthShare Unified Care Record, as in the example here, but it could also be a variety of EMRs you have in your hospital today, like Epic and Cerner, via Fire bundles, or your state HIEs. Then with the patient's clinical data, we can execute rules, whether it be 1, 5, or 200, but in this demo here, we have a very basic predictive model where we inference the source of pain. And once the risk model determines that the patient is at risk, we have many capabilities to deliver this information to your care team, such as the real-time email to Gmail like you just saw, but this could also be a direct message, a secure email, or a push into your EMR's alert inbox. We also have a built-in workflow task list within IRIS, and this is what you can use to rapidly construct a web-based user interface for people to provide feedback about the alerts and also delegate tasks to your care team. Capturing feedback allows us to study the efficacy of the alerts over time, review the action items, such as the 2 you see here, and train the predictive risk models, which Randy will get into in just a minute.
Thank you very much, Jin. Yep, so that's a live demonstration where we actually, although it went fairly quickly, we saw quite a bit happening there. And of course, just to finish this off here, somebody would get notified in real time that based on the triggering event, in this case Alexa, has figured out that, wait a second, this person's reporting more pain than usual. It then reevaluated their health record, as Jin said, but ultimately we then provide an adjudication portal for somebody to come in and say, yes, I've received the alert, and here is my reaction to it. And of course, our workflow engine, you can present any number of feedback mechanisms to capture their input on whether or not they agreed with the alert and what they did about it. And so we'll go ahead and finish that up here. And now what we'll do is go ahead and break this demonstration down piece by piece and talk about how InterSystems IRIS for Health can enable these sorts of solutions to be delivered at massive scale. So with that, let's go ahead and break down the actors. As we discussed here, quite a bit happening inside, this particular demonstration and proposed solution here. We're talking about bringing in device data. We obviously, when you have hundreds or thousands of devices, you need very scalable storage. There then is the machine learning and artificial intelligence aspects of this. In this case, Jin produced a risk model that would suggest which diagnosis was associated with their pain, but of course we could get much more robust in terms of what we're looking to derive from the real-time data and the historical data being combined together. Then there was the notification piece as well. So let's go ahead and get a little more specific step by step here in the actors that we just saw in the proposed solution that Jin walked us through. The first thing that we did was establish connectivity to, in this case, Amazon Alexa, but InterSystems IRIS for Health, as we've already mentioned, has all sorts of connectivity options to establish connectivity to traditional medical devices or today's IoT devices as they continue to emerge. Once we're connected to them, we need to be able to store this data at massive scale, of course. The health systems today have several hundred, several thousand, or tens of thousands of beds, and hundreds of thousands or even millions of patients. So if we start talking about patient wearables, of course, it's pretty easy to see why we would need a solution for storing this data at massive scale. And we'll talk about the horizontal scalability that allows InterSystems IRIS for Health to deliver this sort of storage on commodity hardware. Once we can connect to the devices and store the data, InterSystems IRIS for Health exposes this data out to the state-of-the-art artificial intelligence and machine learning tools in the market today, whether TensorFlow or Spark and Hadoop and many other solutions like that. And of course, those technologies can then machine learn patterns in the device or IoT data and the clinical data and derive predictive risk models. The next thing we do is define triggering events. So in the case of our demo, the triggering event that triggered the reanalysis of the patient was they reported a higher than usual pain level to Amazon Alexa. Of course, there could be any sort of triggering event. The traditional ADTs, your admits or a discharge, that could be a triggering event to evaluate the state of the patient. A new lab results could be a triggering event. A new EKG or a new piece of information coming from a bedside device. A lot of different things could be a triggering event in this context. Then we need to actually operationalize these risk models and deliver the notifications to responders. So we'll talk about what are the decisions you would want to make to actually start delivering information to somebody who can intervene with the patient and improve their outcome. Finally, once these are operationalized, we're going to want to analyze the efficacy of the various alert campaigns as Jin alluded to earlier. So let's go ahead and break these down piece by piece, but before we do, we just want to summarize what we're talking about here, which is that machine learning and predictive modeling are being implemented in many organizations today, And this slide shows how we can incorporate these models created by the data science teams into InterSystems IRIS applications, and essentially we are on both sides of what they're doing, where InterSystems IRIS can bring together the device data, the IoT data, the clinical data that we've stored in the EMRs or gotten from the HIEs, and expose it out to the predictive modeling tools. Once those tools have derived risk models, we can load those risk models up into InterSystems IRIS and execute them in real time, much like what you just saw in the demonstration that my colleague Jin performed. So with that, let's go ahead and break down those 6 steps of operationalizing AI and ML in healthcare. The first thing that we need to do is establish connectivity to the devices that are going to serve as triggering events in this context. So what we have in InterSystems IRIS for Health for establishing connectivity is we rely, InterSystems has always had industry-leading support for healthcare standards-based interoperability. So some medical devices can send HL7, or they route something through something like Capsule and delivers an HL7. We're seeing FHIR, of course, just exploding in adoption out in the field. And gathering data, from EMRs. Certainly there could be triggering events coming from an EMR or even a modality. A new study comes from a modality via DICOM. Any of these things could be triggering events. And then, of course, what we've added with InterSystems IRIS for Health is the API management functionality, which allows us to truly operationalize IoT at a large scale. So that sits on top of what has always been an InterSystems focus, to have a robust enterprise service bus that leverages our SOAP and REST and JSON and XML capabilities. So about that enterprise service bus, what we at InterSystems feel is that InterSystems IRIS for Health gives us what we call a health service bus. So now that we've added the API management component to InterSystems IRIS for Health that we'll break down in a second, we feel that we are truly positioned as a health service bus. It was relatively easy for InterSystems to add API management because we've always had support to be both a client and server of either SOAP or RESTful services. So now what we've done is added a very robust API management layer on top of that. But of course, the underlying infrastructure of massively scalable SOAP and REST support is something that InterSystems has been known for a very long time. Now, when you factor in our unwavering focus on healthcare, which allows us to continue to be an industry leader with regards to support for IHE profiles, CCD and CDA document exchange, FHIR, HL7 version 2, DICOM, and X12, for instance, it begins to become easy to see why we feel we're uniquely positioned as this health service bus. A lot of the traditional ESB solutions out there, they may have good support for REST in the general sense, and they may have robust API management capabilities, but where our clients tell us they fall short is that they're diversified across many verticals. So they're worried about what banks need, what manufacturing needs, what airlines need, and of course, as most of us on this call know, healthcare is a very unique industry. And so what InterSystems, we believe we bring together the best of both worlds. And that's what our health service bus provides. So I'd like to get a little more specific on the new piece of functionality that InterSystems IRIS for Health has, which is our InterSystems API management layer. And what that allows us to do is provide a platform with end-to-end capabilities for the life cycle of deploying APIs, whether as a server or a client. And so starting in the design phase, through the security phase, to publishing APIs, and then ultimately monitoring, analyzing, and hopefully in many cases monetizing these solutions, InterSystems API management provides the end-to-end solution. To get just a little more specific, in the design phase, we support Swagger, which many of you out there are well aware. This is the sort of state of the state with regards to describing a RESTful interface, so we can both import a Swagger spec and create clients to connect to somebody else's API, or we can produce Swagger specs based on APIs that we deploy in InterSystems IRIS. Once we've designed the API, we have API Gateway, and the InterSystems API Gateway allows us to rapidly secure APIs with regards to things like adding in authentication, hooks to an Active Directory, etc., encryption, TLS, and even very specific modules to prevent things like a denial of service attack. Once we've made decisions around securing the API, we can publish it. We certainly support versioning and canary testing and things like that. And then, of course, we go live and move into the monitoring phase, where we can monitor traffic, we can define subscribers to the APIs, we can rate limit them, we can throttle them. You know, the idea, of course, especially if we're looking into monetizing access to our data, you know, a given user may pay X for the first 100,000 clicks a day, they pay Y for clicks 100,001 through 500,000, and they pay Z for anything beyond 500,000. etc., etc. The InterSystems API management capabilities allow you to define those subscribers and track their access to your data. There's a library of plugins that make it very, very easy to secure your APIs, to connect up to Active Directories, to add things like OAuth or key authentication, etc. And this really is truly a drag-and-drop environment that allows for you know, these sorts of enhancements to your APIs. So in summary, what InterSystems API management gives us is the high performance and high scalability that InterSystems has always been known for, the security and reliability that healthcare demands, and a breadth of capabilities to take us from the design phase all the way to the analysis and monetization phase. And of course, we always have an eye on the future. As streaming comes along and things like that, InterSystems will be well positioned to meet your needs. In the context of the demonstration that you saw, InterSystems API management, you know, if you deploy this sort of solution at scale, let's just take Amazon Alexa as an example, you know, but it could be any IoT, any patient wearable, any bedside device. The idea is within the InterSystems API management console, you can provision each device with a unique device ID, and then place that device in its intended location, such as a hospital room. Once it's activated, that device communicates to the InterSystems API Management Gateway and carries that device ID along with it. And then, of course, we can correlate the device to the patient MRN for the patient who happens to be in the room at that moment in time. The API Management Gateway can federate and control access to the IRIS for Health instance. And then, of course, once we're connected, the API management layer permits the operational reporting, real-time access control and throttling, device health checks. We want to make sure bedside devices are staying connected. We want to get alerts if they become disconnected or if they're inactive for some period of time. We can help you with these things. And then, of course, as I mentioned, a very robust suite of security features and additional functionality for truly operationalizing these APIs. Now, that's how we leverage the InterSystems API management in the context of this demo, but there are, of course, other uses for InterSystems API management. In particular, we see more and more the health systems, in particular, you know, coming to us and saying, hey, we have initiatives with pharma or life sciences or the Johnson & Johnsons of the world, the Biogens of the world, where they want access to data that we have. And that could come in many shapes and sizes, and as I mentioned early on here, we're even seeing health systems starting to hire sales teams to drive this sort of activity. Well, if you want to do that, you're going to have a very robust solution for monitoring the access to your data, and of course reporting and analyzing on the use of those subscriptions. Marketing and outreach initiatives benefit from our API management. As I mentioned at the beginning of the call, many of us, when we drive down the highway, we see at General Hospital right now the emergency department wait time is 7 minutes. And of course, they're looking to drive traffic to their healthcare institution. Well, we can also partner with the pharmacies in the area or other businesses and do collaborative outreach with them where we can show our data, on their websites. And all of that traffic in this day and age, happens through JSON payloads being exchanged over RESTful services. Many of us are aware that Medicare and Medicaid mandates are requiring payers and providers to stand up access to FHIR resources. And, of course, our API management is a natural fit to sit on top of our FHIR access gateway and monitor traffic. And as a matter of fact, we have another demonstration, which if any of you are interested in seeing, we'd be happy to show you a live demonstration of our API manager sitting on top of our FHIR access gateway and showing us how often our FHIR resources are being requested, what the response times are, any errors that occur, and the things that are going to be needed for our clients to meet those mandates that are coming from CMS. And then finally, just generally providing services to the affiliates, and the vendors that they partner with, benefits tremendously from. So those are a few other uses of our API management. To get back in the context of the demo that you saw, once we're connected up to the bedside devices or the IoT, the Alexas of the world, we need to be able to store this data at massive scale. And ultimately what we're looking to do is expose this data to the machine learning and AI tools out there, which we'll talk about in step 3. But for starters, as you can imagine, if we're storing clinical data, device data, IoT data, patient wearable data, for the populations that we serve, we're going to need to be able to scale very, very well. And so let's talk about how InterSystems IRIS for Health provides tremendous horizontal scalability in our multi-model database platform. So what we do is provide a comprehensive array of scalability capabilities that can scale for different types of workloads, whether they're transactional or analytic. We can scale for different types of user concurrency and data sets, and all of this transparent to the application. So our customers and partners can make optimal use of high-end hardware through the vertical scaling capabilities that InterSystems has always been known for. And now, of course, InterSystems can support larger and more varied workloads with affordable hardware through horizontal scaling. So let's touch on that. What InterSystems IRIS allows for is independent scaling of users and data in an elastic manner that provides highly efficient and high-performance scaling for SQL queries. So what this slide depicts is essentially, for the technical folks on the call, a proposed architecture pattern for InterSystems IRIS, where essentially we're ingesting data from IoT devices, wearables, EMRs in real time every day, all day, and we're storing it in a horizontally scaled fashion in the shard servers that you see at the bottom of the slide here. InterSystems IRIS then presents a shard master to the outside world, to the requesters, to the applications, which can essentially take in a single, for instance, SQL query and farm that work off in a massively parallel processing manner to 1 or 2 or 200 or 2,000 shard servers that sit behind that shard master. Now, that previous slide was quite technical, but it is important to cover because in large part it's what makes our performance for querying large distributed data sets competitively superior. So this slide shows benchmark results from an InterSystems IRIS proof of concept, and what our results show, and this was done by a third party, it shows consistently better performance compared with MemSQL, MemSQL column store, and Sybase. So the InterSystems IRIS results reflect faster query results on a 10x larger data set than what the other vendors were querying, with a smaller hardware footprint and with 0 failures. So this type of impact, this persistence that we're offering, the scalability and performance, this is a sit-up-straight sort of delivery of information here when you compare it to other technologies that are in use today. To get a little more detailed, what this slide shows is the same study but essentially, InterSystems IRIS for Health is the green line you see at the bottom compared to those other three technologies. So again, up top here, here's the tabular form of the results, where you see we were storing 10 times as much data and responding as the workload increased on the servers. We were able to stay relatively flat with regards to our performance in responding to those queries. So in the most demanding workload, as you see a query returning 984 rows, as we added more and more concurrency to the workload, InterSystems IRIS for Health was able to stay relatively flat in terms of query response time, whereas other vendors simply fall off the map or have drastically reduced performance with regards to responding to those workloads. So again, we, with our API management, can connect up to IoT, medical devices, EMRs, and now InterSystems IRIS for Health gives you the ability to store this data with tremendous scalability. So the next piece of the puzzle is using that data to machine learn predictive risk models. And so what we do is make it very, very easy to use best-of-breed, third-party machine learning and artificial intelligence tools with the InterSystems IRIS for Health database. So some of these third-party tools our clients are using, you have your Spark, Hadoop, TensorFlow, exposing this data out to Jupyter and Zeppelin for the notebooks, and of course, really many or most other third-party AI and ML tools are options for us. And essentially, what we do is expose this data set to allow these other technologies to train their models. Now, in the demonstration that Jin walked you through, we used Amazon Alexa as a triggering event, but of course we did also show you that we brought over that large XML payload of historical clinical information that we had for that patient. So the idea there is that the triggering event, some device or a new lab result or an ADT arrives. What we then want to do is go grab the rest of the information we have for that patient and run risk models against it. So those data sources for that additional information could be a product like InterSystems HealthShare, which many of you know is the industry-leading platform for health information exchange and unified care records. But it could also be the FHIR repository that your EMR supports. Of course, everybody knows Epic and Cerner are continuing to evolve their capabilities to exposing the clinical data. There is also non-clinical data that we may want to incorporate in either the data set that trains the risk models or the data set that is used in the real-time evaluation of the patient status. So our clients are realizing that bringing in financial data or claims data or even RMV, Registry of Motor Vehicles data, public registry information, these things can improve the predictive risk models. The classic example we hear over and over again is simply understanding the demographics about where a patient lives. So their zip code. If a patient lives in an area and their zip code reflects that they live in an area where, for instance, less than 30% of the people in that zip code have a bachelor's degree. These can be things that influence models and make them more accurate in terms of predicting an adverse outcome. So again, InterSystems IRIS, with its tremendous scalability and its ability to connect up to many types of clinical and non-clinical data sources, positions us very well to be a source of information for your AI and ML tools. Which, as I mentioned before, helps us be on both sides of this. So to go a little more specifically about one particular best-of-breed artificial intelligence tool, we can talk about the optimizations that we've made for Apache Spark, which many of you know Apache Spark is a high-performance, open-source cluster computing framework that can be, for instance, in many demonstrations, 100 times faster than MapReduce for in-memory analytics. Well, what InterSystems IRIS does is we can integrate directly with Spark via a shard-aware Spark connector that is native to InterSystems IRIS. And this connector presents our data shards as a native partition for the highest performance. And for those of you that are interested in such things, this integration enables predicate pushdown, which means simply that Spark can send the predicates, which are filters and where conditions, to each InterSystems IRIS shard directly and retrieve results that satisfy those predicates. And essentially what we're doing is enabling organizations to leverage InterSystems IRIS to optimize Spark queries for improved performance. So nice visual depiction of this is essentially what we're talking about. The InterSystems IRIS Apache Spark connector pushes as much work as possible down to the InterSystems IRIS shards, which limits the amount of data that needs to be passed back to the Spark cluster, ultimately increasing the efficiency and limiting traffic back and forth. And so these data source APIs, they essentially provide a pluggable mechanism for accessing structured data through Spark SQL. And this way, data sources can be more than just a simple pipe that allows Spark to pull data into it. This optimizer integration provided by the InterSystems IRIS API, as I mentioned, means filtering and column pruning can be pushed down to the shards, and ultimately this speeds up the Spark jobs themselves. And of course, another strength of our data source API is that it gives users the ability to manipulate data in whichever language they're comfortable with that Spark supports, regardless of how the data is sourced. So this talks about how we push data into the AI and NML tools, and then they derive predictive risk models, and as I mentioned, we're on the other side of this as well, which is that we then operationalize these predictive risk models by leveraging InterSystems IRIS for Health's capability to execute models that are reflected in predictive modeling markup language, which is commonly referred to as PAML out in the field. And so what PAML is an XML standard that fully defines the parameters of a predictive risk model when they're calculated by an analytics suite. And once the model is exported to PAML, it's fully defined, and any tool should be able to read, any tool capable of reading the PAML standard should be able to exactly reproduce that model so it can run in that environment. And essentially, as I'm sure you're guessing, InterSystems IRIS for Health can automatically generate optimized native code by importing these PAML models that are derived in the AI and ML tools. Now, more and more analytics vendors are supporting the standard and contributing to it, and we currently cover upwards of 70% of the predictive models, and we're going to continue to cover more. Ultimately, this enables the predictive models that are created in the specialized environments by your data science teams to be seamlessly incorporated into data processing pipelines in InterSystems IRIS for Health. We support a number of predictive model types, as you see here on the slide, and of course we're going to support more as we go. So, once we've learned and imported the predictive models, we then want to define the trigger and events. In the demonstration that we showed you, a higher than usual pain recorded by Amazon Alexa was the trigger and event. But as I've mentioned already, there can be really many different trigger events, such as patient wearables reporting new information, a new ADT or lab result hits the EMR, etc. And so essentially, that's one of the last things that you'll want to work out. Then we operationalize the predictive risk models, and this really involves the sort of traditional questions of journalism, which says when we want to operationalize these predictive risk models, who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who's going to receive the alerts? What will the alerts say? How often will they be sent? Where will they be viewed and worked on? And do we want to provide a feedback mechanism, as you saw in the data? How are these alerts going to be responded to over time? So these are, of course, the business decisions that our clients are making or will need to make when they want to operationalize these models. So we saw in the demonstration, we leverage the InterSystems IRIS for Health workflow engine, as well as our capabilities to send real-time notifications. In this case, we saw a secure email, but we support direct. Many of the EMRs out there have RESTful or SOAP services that allow us to push an alert into that EMR's inbox. So again, from a business standpoint, these are the questions you're going to want to answer as we operationalize these campaigns. And then finally, we go live. We want to be able to analyze what is happening as we've operationalized these campaigns. And so InterSystems IRIS for Health has an open analytics strategy. In the context of this demo, we would want to analyze how many alerts are sent, how are they being responded to, do people agree or disagree with the alerts, etc. And of course, there are many ways that we could do that analysis. InterSystems IRIS for Health has in-house analytics capabilities. What was formerly known as Deep Sea certainly has survived and continues to be enhanced as the InterSystems IRIS for Health analytics solution that's part of the product, but we also work very well with the Tableaus of the world, business objects, crystal reports, really any ODBC or JDBC compliant analytics tool can work with InterSystems IRIS and leverage our horizontally scalable SQL capabilities. One other thing that I wanted to briefly touch on is that InterSystems has a continued focus on working with unstructured data, and so InterSystems IRIS for Health gives us the text analytics capabilities. And just quickly here, why some of our health system clients are doing this, many of us are familiar with the use cases around finding discrete values that are buried in unstructured data, such as pulling things like ejection fraction or FEV1 FEV1 values out of unstructured data. But also, customers are analyzing, the clinical notes and things of the like that come out of the EMR to see if proper protocols are being followed. So for instance, if we see data being represented in an unstructured fashion where there is in fact a discrete landing spot for that data in the EMR, our NLP capabilities and text analytics capabilities can help you surface those sorts of issues. So generally speaking, the existing IKNOW capabilities that many of you are aware of certainly have made their way into InterSystems IRIS for Health. One thing that we've added is support for UEMA, which is the Unified Information Management Architecture. And why this is important is because there are many different kinds of specialized natural language processing tools that each have a specific type of domain applicability. And it's not uncommon that our clients are using multiple tools in sequence, for instance. So what UEMA enables is much like PAML. It's a sort of standard-based, pluggable natural language processing pipeline to be defined and executed where the results from one tool feed as input into the next. So long story short, InterSystems IRIS can work with these UEMA represented NLP functionalities. And so what that does is give us the ability to allow UEMA compliant text processing tools to be included in the processing pipelines, as I mentioned. So in summary, to go back to where we were, or where we started, I should say, that demonstration truly shined a light on many of the different areas where InterSystems IRIS for Health can be used to create value out of the data that you're capturing every day, all day, from your EMR, from the bedside devices, from IoT, patient wearables, etc. Bringing all of this together in one massively scalable platform is what InterSystems IRIS for Health, that's the promise that we're delivering on. So we would love to speak with any of you directly if you have similar initiatives or want to explore these capabilities in more depth. We'll go ahead and take a look and see if we had any questions come in. Okay, doesn't look like we have, so I will go ahead and just remind everybody that this session is recorded, and we would be thrilled to speak with you more in depth about what InterSystems IRIS for Health could mean to you. So thank you all for taking the time to join us today, and thank you very much to my colleague Jin for preparing the demo that you saw today, and we look forward to talking to you hopefully in the near future. Thank you, everybody, and I hope you have a great weekend.